Okay, well, welcome everyone. This is the Midwest Cover Crops Council Cover Crops Field Guide update. We're just going to kind of go through some of the changes that we've made to the latest edition of the field guide. My name is Anna Morrow. I'm the program manager for MCCC, and we're glad you could all join us. So first of all, today's presenters are myself, Charles Ellis from the University of Missouri Extension, Eileen Klodivko from Purdue University, and Marisol Berkey from North Dakota State University. Additional field guide team members are Dean Boss, Ann Verhollen, Barry Fisher, Gary Lefswing, Sarah Noggle, and Nathan Johann. So just a little note about Midwest Cover Crops Council, if you're not familiar with us. Our mission is to facilitate widespread adoption of cover crops across the Midwest. And we do that a few different ways. We share and create extension materials. We have an online cover crop selector tool that's county specific as an education tool to help folks learn more about cover crops. We also have an annual conference every year and do a lot of networking and outreach type activities that way. A little bit about the field guide, if you're not familiar with it. Our first edition was released in 2012, and we've sold 33,000 copies of that. The second edition was released in 2014, and we've sold over 62,000 copies there. And then in 2015, we received the ASA Outstanding Extension Educational Materials Award. So this is something that we are very proud of, and we want to maintain that high standard of materials. And so here recently, we've updated the guide to the third edition. And just a quick overview of the content of our guide. We've got basically 5 different sections in the beginning of the guide. So the first is getting started, how to choose your cover crops, and different suggested cover crops for common rotations. The second is seeding methods. The third would be terminating cover crops. A new section is planting green. We've also got herbicide carryover concerns and cover crops as weed fighters. The fourth, is pests. So that's the good, the bad, and the ugly. We've got insects, slugs, voles, nematodes, and diseases. And the fifth section is effects on cash crops, economics, climate and plant type considerations, crop insurance, and other USDA program considerations. And then the part that I like the best about the guide are the species sections. And this just explains different characteristics, ratings for various goals, seeding rates, and cautions for various cover crops. And those are all classified by grasses, legumes, non-legume broadleaves, up-and-coming species, and then a new section that we've included is species commonly used in mixes. And with our additions in this third edition, we've got about 25% more content. So we're really excited about the things that we've added. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Charles to talk about some of the updates to our guide.
Thank you, Anna. As Anna is talking about, this is a regional guide, but also it's supplying some local information that's really relevant for local producers. And one of those, as Anna said, it began in 2012. So one of the things we did update was the climate data, and with the growing zones, we updated those growing zones, and those were shifted to the north with updated data there. And with that, the growing the grid there you see with the growing zones and the planting windows have been updated to reflect that new data. So those are give some local information to producers to reference that. So since 2012, that's some updated information that producers can reference. Next slide, please. And another enhancement here is cover crop seeding equipment. People working with cover crops know producers have been very on the forefront here of coming up with new seeding methods and working with manufacturers here. They've opened up new planting windows with some innovative practices here to cover crop seeding methods. New planting windows have kind of developed with the early interseeder, as you see there at the top photo. Also, we've added some information on seeding at harvest with the combine, and we've also added some more innovative, more experimental seeding methods, such as with drone technology. It's kind of developing kind of some emerging technology with top technologies with the drone, as well as we've also updated some information with more traditional seeding methods that were in the earlier editions. Next slide, please. And we also kept, some of the additional previous recommendations with terminations. And we have to keep in mind, with our recommendations, we have to keep in mind what, not what may work, but what does work. And we're staying with recommendations for particularly new producers looking to get into cover crops. The recommendations of 2 weeks before planting termination, or when crops are the cover crops actively growing in that 6 to 12 inch growth stage of the cover crop. And then as we also have updated information for producers as they gain experience with cover crops. There's additional benefits the farmers may be experiencing, such as greater biomass, weed suppression, other benefits they may start to experience as they work with the cover crops. Next slide, please. This slide here is referencing some outside information we've included in the pocket guide. This is a map from Risk Management Agency. This is what is currently their termination guidelines. This is what is as of today. So as the pocket guide may age in coming years, we need to keep in mind that you may want to make sure this is still current. So may want to cross-reference this, make sure that this stays current as the guide does age. And then also we've got some guidance here on our website here for some other publications we've developed for spring conditions that may arise when we have unfavorable conditions in the springtime. So we're just kind of pointing out some outside sources you can look to for termination guidelines. Next slide, please. And this is maybe one of the newest sections we've got in the guide is what a management practice that producers have really kind of taken to in the last few years is planting green or planting into the living cover crop and then terminating immediately after planting or within a few days of planting, and particularly with soybeans. And we've added a pretty extensive component there of guidance on planting green, and also particularly with the soybeans and how to kind of get into this management practice, and also addresses the advantages and challenges of getting into this management style. And with that, I will turn it to Eileen Clodifko.
All right, thank you, Charlie. So I'm going to talk a little bit, just very briefly, about some of what we have in the guide related to effects on excuse me, on cover crops and cash crops. The first thing that a lot of people ask about is herbicide carryover. Are the herbicides that they're using for corn and soybeans compatible with the cover crops that they want to use? So we have, and that some of that material changes quite rapidly as new chemicals and formulations come out. So we've updated that table. We have made it easier to use by combining the corn and soybean herbicides listed together in the same table. They're organized in the first column by the common name instead of the trade name. The trade name is still given in the table. We also have the group number for the herbicide and the half-life. And the main columns of interest really are usually the compatible cover crops, where we know in general there's no problem for those cover crops and that herbicide. And then a column on the cover crop concerns. Which cover crops are you likely to maybe not do so well with if there is some herbicide carryover, and then some additional comments. So this is up to date as of now, and hopefully that provides a little guidance on which herbicides might be of concern for which cover crops. Next slide, please. The pest section, we had a pest section before. We have added a small section on voles in addition, since that's kind of one of our pests of concern, and basically updated the insect, nematode, and disease sections. So just like cover crops can improve habitat for beneficial organisms, they can also improve habitat for some of our pests. And so we talk about those and a little bit about the potential management of those. And we do reiterate to folks that when folks decide to do cover crops, it is a commitment that also requires them to commit to scouting for pests, so that the pests can be dealt with before they become too difficult to deal with in a particular situation. Next slide, please. We did add a little section on cover crop economics. First of all, as you can all imagine, you can get both positive and negative effects of cover crops on cash crop yields, depending tremendously on how the cover crops are managed and which cover crops are grown in the first place. We do basically say that with experience and good management, there's a lot better chance of success, which is pretty obvious, but bears repeating, that as people learn how to do cover crops better and have more experience with it, they usually can deal with the challenges that there might be for cash crop yields. And of course, that's part of the idea of having some of the educational materials that we have, like field guides and material on the web and extension presentations and field days and so on. We do also remind people that soil productivity and soil health really improve slowly over many years. It's not an instantaneous fix to any problems that the soil might have. And that cover crops might improve yields more in stressful years than in years with good weather, because by building soil resilience, you would expect to see more of a benefit at those times when there are stresses for the crop. Next slide, please. The economic impacts, not just yield, but other aspects of the economics, vary greatly, of course, depending on a number of factors. First of all, of course, the specific cover crop and cash crop combination that is grown, the specific management practices that are used related to termination, related to tillage or no tillage, related to nutrient management. We do stress a number of times in the guide that cover crops are a system, and people can't just go out and plant cover crops without really thinking through all the other aspects of their system. Certainly depends on the weather this year, as well as the overall climate of an area and the length of time that the system has included cover crops. Folks have generally found that the longer the system has had cover crops in it, the more beneficial impacts can accrue because of that change in soil health with time. We do reference a relatively new technical bulletin from SARE that talks about cover crop economics, and they do a really good job of talking about things other than just yield, to remind people that there can be other short-term economic benefits, such as weed control, such as ameliorating soil compaction, or integrating livestock and using it for grazing, and some other factors. So we refer people to that to think about things other than just crop yield. Next, please. All right, I will turn it over to Marisol Berti now.
Thank you, Eileen. Yeah, the previous guy had this cover crop species, and we have added 3 new ones, and we have some other sections, and we have updated this species ratings too. So in the past guide, for those that are not familiar with it, we had crop selection benefits by each one of the crop species. And you can see here like nitrogen source, nitrogen scavenger, soil builder, compaction fighter, erosion preventer, lasting residue, weed fighter, grazing value, and forage harvest value. And then the rated, each crop species is rated poor, fair, good, very good, or excellent. Just to give an idea of which are the benefits, to tie this with the objectives the farmer has to have this cover crop in his field. The list changed a little bit. What we changed is we used to have subsoil loosener and topsoil loosener, and we changed that only to compaction fighter. Then also change forage value to forage harvest value. In addition, each crop has some seeding methods and the seeding rate recommended for that. We used to have aerial seeding, and now we changed that to broadcast without incorporation. So each crop has drilled, broadcast with shallow incorporation, and broadcast without incorporation. The reason for this is what Charlie mentioned earlier, that there's different technologies now for interseeding at different times, and different equipment has been developed for that, and that's what is changed. And we have here a range of seeding rates. Next, please. So the seeding rates are going to be in a range because, of course, it changes with different conditions and purposes and in different states. We updated all the photos and also added photos of the leaf color region for grass identification and seedling stage. And there is a seeding rate adjustment page in the guide that will talk about how to the different ranges that we show in seeding rates, how to adjust them. Next one, please. We still have a lot of the ones we had before, but we added some new ones. But the popular cover crop species in our guide are the oats and rye for grasses, crimson clover and hairy vetch for the legumes, and radish and rapeseed for the brassicas. Next one, please. So the new ones in this guide are the white clover, forage brassicas, which includes several crops like cabbage, kale, collards, leaf turnip, and hybrids, and balansa clover, which is a legume. Those are the 3 new crop species in the guide. Next, please. In addition to that, we have a new section with those species commonly used in a mix. Many of these species and crops are never planted alone as a cover crop, but they're very common in mixes. And so we decided to create this new section to have some idea of these cover crops that don't have their own page, but at least they're used as cover crops. So we have a list of them, and for each one of these crops, we have indicated if it's a cool or warm season, grass, legume, or broadleaf, or other broadleaves, prostate, climbing or upright growth, biomass potential, low, medium, or high, fibrous root or taproot type, the seeds per pound, seeding depth recommended, and some comments about it. This to give an idea to people if they're including this in the mix, so they know some about all these crops in the guide. Next one, please. And with this, I give the presentation back to Anna. Thanks for attending this webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Marisol. So I'm sure your first question is, how can I get the guide? We are hoping they're available very soon. We were hoping they would be available for purchase today, but they're not quite ready. The first round of shipments have gone out, and so we're hoping within a week They will be available at the education store. So you can find those a couple of different ways. You can go to our website, which for those of you who are familiar with us, we are changing our web address. We will soon be midwestcovercrops.org. You can go to that web address now. Please change your bookmark to that address. The old mccc.msu.edu address will still work for quite a while. But under other resources of the main menu, you'll find a link to purchase the guide. And you can also go straight to the education store at Purdue to make a purchase there. The guides will be $6 a piece, or just like in the past, we will give a 10% discount on a box of 25. So please join our listserv and follow us on social media so that you are aware of when those guides are available. We will make sure and put that out for your information. You can join our listserv by just going to the main menu of our website. It's the last one there on the main menu. And our social media accounts are both at Cover Crops MCCC. We'd also like to invite you to our 2022 annual meeting and conference. This will be March 7th through 9th, and it's in partnership with the Conservation Tillage and Technology Conference in Ada, Ohio. We're hoping to open registration in January. And again, if you're on our social media or listserv, you'll be the first to know when that registration opens. So with that, if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. My contact information is up here, my email and phone number. You can also find my contact information on our website. So with that, thank you everyone for coming. Appreciate your time, and this recording will be posted to the website.